Hi, and welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. I'm delighted to welcome this week Coral Short, who's an artist and somatic practitioner. And I'm hoping that they're going to explain to us what that is because I have absolutely no idea. Welcome along, Coral.
Hi, nice to be here, Emma, and nice to be here with you all. Yeah, somatics practitioner is someone who's like a therapist, but instead of talking about all your problems, like the problems do arise, but we look at where emotions lie in the body, where the sensations are around the anger or the sadness or the trauma that you may be holding. We don't dive deep into the trauma. We look at before and after and build capacity to be with hard things and also build capacity to be with joy, because humans have a hard time also being with joy as well as the hard things. So we're just building like the muscle inside, almost like the soul muscle. Like we're deactivating, activating, pendulating, titrating. I don't know if you know any of these words.
Well,
Basically,
my dad was a chemistry teacher, so I recognize a few of them.
but the nervous system is just settling, and the body's telling the story, and the body's doing the work. And instead of talking in the mind, the whole body is working, softly and gently. And over time, things are released, and life becomes bigger. So.
And so I'm interested then, have you noticed a real change in the people that you're working with over the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I've trained to become a somatics practitioner during the pandemic, which was a really good use of my time. I studied to be a meditation teacher as well as a somatics practitioner during COVID times. But I work mostly with trans and non-binary people, and I have noticed huge changes in them, like in their capacity to be with the life that they want to be with,
Mm.
because sometimes we're trapped into a life we don't really want to be in, due to capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, whatever. And we're just trapped into these small lives. And then, just being able to be with what you actually want to do, what makes you alive, is just so radical in our social structures. So I love to see people just bloom and start to do the things that they, want to do, and let go of the stuff that they've been lugging around for eons.
Mm. In a world that is perhaps quite hostile in some places towards especially trans people.
Trans people, like accessing joy for trans and non-binary people is just such a beautiful thing, because I think queer joy is something that happens, and just celebrating that, also celebrating no's, because in society, women or trans non-binary people have a hard time saying no sometimes, and celebrating no has been really exciting. Like, I think, I'm here to talk about my menopause party, and just saying no, this is not shameful.
Yeah.
Menopause is not
No to the
shameful.
stigma.
Yeah,
No to the taboo.
let's celebrate this, and feel the joy. And speaking of the menopause party, I didn't see one menopause party anywhere. Like, maybe there has been them, but I looked at the hashtag on Instagram, which is a young social media thing. I'm
Yeah.
49. I didn't see one. I was the first person to have a menopause party on that platform. I hope there will be many more to come. A lot of people have told me that they want to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I love the idea. That's why when I saw
Yeah,
your post about it on the Facebook group that I was like, yes, we need to talk about this. This is great. Because I've talked to my husband about it. So I'm 49, turning 50 at the end of this year in December. I'm sort of ambivalent about having a 50th birthday party, but definitely in the kind of the last sort of year or so where I've been looking at this subject so much, I'm like, yeah, menopause party. Let's,
yeah,
I'm gonna get out there and be like, yes, I've survived going through this
yeah.
thing. I'm still here. So yeah, I love it. So tell us a bit more about the kind of first of all how was your sort of experience leading up to menopause, perimenopause, as much as you're kind of happy to share. Did it kind of hit you out of the blue, or was
Mine wasn't so bad. I luckily genetically, I'm blessed. I was blessed with an easy menopause, and my sleep got shorter. Um, Maybe my partner would say I was a little moodier, but I felt pretty the same. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't, maybe I got minor hot flashes, but they were not very much, you know? Yeah, no, my menopause was really low, but when my partner works in anti-ageism and is really like into times in the life, like
Mhm.
they got me a Chiron return reading lately. I don't know if you know about the Chiron return, but in astrology, it's around this time in our life that the planet, it's not a planet, it's an asteroid Chiron
Mm.
going around and it comes to the place you were born. And so they
Ah.
got me a reading called like Chiron is the wounded healer. So from this woman, Liz Gunn, and I think she's in South Carolina. Anyways, it's like it's a time in the life, like in planets, but also like for menopause. And they really wanted me to mark this time because they said it was important because they work in the anti-ageism field with Ashton Applewhite and
Mhm.
oldschool.info, I think their website is called. But they kind of brought it to my attention that I should mark the date because I was missing a lot of periods. And so then when the year I was coming up to a year and I was just praying I didn't get my period, like
It's so annoying. Have you have to, like,
yeah,
start
I was just
counting
like,
over
I
again?
really
Right?
don't want that mess anymore. You get used to like, I mean, and I don't mean to be like period can be great and bring children and all this, but like it is a bit messy and the PMS slows you down. So
It's
um,
inconvenient.
yeah, it's inconvenient. So then when the year happened, I realized the year was going to happen. I thought, why not? Like I'm a performance artist. You can see my art at coralshort.com. And like I had a friend in Berlin who wore red every time they had their period, like their whole period. They had all these red outfits. And I was like,
Wow.
it's fascinating. And I always knew when they had their period because they were wearing red. And I thought to myself, like, why don't I have a party where everyone wears red? And I had all these red balloons someone given me, and we brought red food. And we had like different ages and dogs and visitors and genders. And yeah, a lot of people came out and, COVID's all weird, made everyone weird. So I think there was 15 people, but it felt like, 100.
Yeah. Just
And
getting used to
we
being around people
we
again.
just like celebrated that moment. And I think like Roe versus Wade had happened. I don't know if you're aware of all that in
Yeah.
United Kingdom. But I just thought, like, what about our bodies? What about the medical system? What about like our autonomy, our rituals, our celebration, our joy? And as a queer who doesn't have children, um, due to the causes and conditions of my life, like I thought, why not just reclaim this moment, And with
Mm.
the support of my partner and my community, like we were able to have this pretty big for me celebration because I've been quite safe during COVID, but we were outside on a peninsula under some big willow trees by the water. And yeah, it just felt good to claim my body and to claim this time and celebrate it because I feel like the system hides it. It's not talked about. And like in the heterosexual community, I think it is talked about a bit, because there's value and worth in childbearing in that community. But like in the queer community, it's almost non existent. And the only place it's talked about actually that I've seen is in the UK, in London. I've noticed that there's some action there. Um, and I'm just so pleased that
You
people
mean menopause generally is kind of
queer menopause is
right.
particularly. There's some
Yeah.
people working in that field, and you can find that like hashtagged on Instagram. I can't think of their names right now. I feel bad, but
Yeah. I think Tanya Glide is one of the
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
key
Have you
people.
interviewed that person?
Not yet.
No,
I think I did ask, but they were busy at the
they were
time, so
busy. They
that's
seem very
fine.
busy. But yeah, I'm so happy that it's being talked about. And there's a person in London named Raf, and someone had told me about their zine they did on them for queer menopause, and I thought that also sparked something in me that I was like, oh, this
Being
is something
visible and yeah.
I can talk about. And that was, I think that person showed me the zine. A person named Jack showed me their zine they made about Raf like maybe 6 years ago, and I started to think about it. I was like, huh, queers and menopause. Why don't we talk about it?
Yeah.
And in heterosexual communities, like it's not really talked about either much, is it?
It's changing, and I think you're right that actually the UK seems to be right out ahead of kind of those conversations happening much more. And I think certainly kind of celebrities, public figures in the UK seem much more willing to kind of put themselves out there in the media and talk about it, whereas in
Mhm.
the US, I think there are only far fewer, and I don't know if part of that is the sort of, again, linked to the sort of the ageism and the fear
Yeah.
of, oh
Mhm.
gosh, if I come out as sort of being perimenopausal, I'm kind of going to be chopped
Oh,
liver or
yeah.
whatever, and no one's going to want to work with me. I'm going to get, I think it was just was it a Canadian or American, in the US, the newsreader who was just very was in the news because they were fired because of their grey hair or something.
Oh, no, I
Very
didn't see
very
that.
recently.
Yeah, there is
Um,
a very strong ageism. Maybe it's linked to Hollywood. I'm not sure why it's so strong, but I think also, like, I lived in Glasgow for 4 years, in London for a year, and the NHS is just like, I'm sure it has its problems, but it is funding that kind of stuff, and that's really important to have some funding behind, these ideas and support for people, because I had it easy, but it's not always easy, and there's like no like sick days for menopause here. I don't know how it is there, but
well, again, I think quite a few companies are now developing menopause policies, and there's a, I think this is the first year there's going to be some menopause friendly employer awards coming in the next month or two.
mm, I love
So it'll be interesting if to see if that kind of thing, once it's kind of publicly out there in the UK, whether that spreads to other kind of countries like the US and to Canada. So I'm sure, once those kind of things start to be normalized in one country, certainly, in a sort of in a Western country, that they start to be sort of picked up a bit more in other
spread. I mean,
countries
I think it's
too.
very feminist to do this. There's something very inherently feminist to celebrate this time in women's lives, or trans non-binary lives, because it's like, especially for females, it's like, like you're seen as less valuable as you age, or people don't take you seriously, or you're not sexually attractive, or all these things. But like, it really takes away the power of an older female person, or assigned female at birth person, who like has gathered so much wisdom, and then to be not respected at this time of life or after is just, shows how our society is, really like how we treat the older people in our society. So yeah, I would love to see a change around this, that like older people who stop having their periods are valued, and onwards from this point, because it's almost like a gathering of wisdom of your whole life comes around this time. Like, this is what the astrologer said to me. It's like you realize you learned a lot, and that you're
Yeah.
going forward with all this wisdom to do the thing you want to do. And and I think that society doesn't value this, but like internally, like I think there can be revolutions inside us, and collectively too. Like just me and you talking, the people listening right now, like we can all have our inner unique revolutions, like somatically in the body, being like, it's okay. I'm going through these changes. I have this wisdom, and I'm not alone in it.
Mm.
You know?
And I think there's a bit of a chain reaction as well, because for many of us, our own mothers didn't talk about this, and
Mhm.
so it's kind of that almost that atomic kind of effect of, the more people have these conversations and the more normalized it becomes, then you kind of that keeps kind of radiating outwards, and not just to the kind of cohort or kind of Gen X folk going through it now, but the sort of, the next generation coming up and the one after that. And
Yes,
hopefully,
yes.
in the same way that, a lot of the conversations around gender, are so far advanced in the sort of millennials and the kind of the generation coming up, then can imagine in sort of 1-2 generations time, that as menopause gets talked about so much more, and the sort of midlife transition, it's not, all just about menopause, but, redefining those ideas around aging, and, the fact that probably my experience of being 50 next year is going to be very different than my grandmother's experience of being 50.
Hmm.
And what my, if I have a granddaughter, what her experience of being 50 is going to be. So yeah, it's really interesting. What sort of reactions did you get from people when you talked about having the menopause party?
I think people, it seemed to be like a bit of surprise or shock maybe that I was so public about it. But
Mm,
I'm a performance artist, so it's not that weird for me. But I think that there was like a huge, like, because I was feeling excited and joyful, like I think it was contagious. And like I don't have so many followers on Instagram, but I had so many likes on that post and like so many comments. And so there's something about it that's needed. Like, it's just needed. And I think what you're talking about, like how like gender has changed so much, like, you know like teens now, like there's so many theys, like just like tons and tons of teens are theys now, like
mhm.
straight people, queer people, I don't know what, however they define, but there's tons of theys. And that wasn't the case, for Gen Xers. Like, they was kind of like came about when we were already older. And I think, like, if our Gen X generation has these parties and the younger people can see us celebrating, then they'll probably do it even better than we do it, like, because the new generation is just so open minded, and ideas are just going so fast. Like, I just recently joined TikTok, and I'm like, wow, the ideas are like, you got 15
There
seconds.
there goes another hour of my life looking at videos.
Just like, I think, like, it'll just, yeah, I think you're right. I think it'll be like a waterfall effect. Like, if there's a sprinkling of menopause parties, there'll be a lot more menopause parties. And it'll just, like, I think we're tired of being shame, feeling shame.
Yeah.
We want to lift that
I
shame.
want I want it to catch on. I want
Yeah,
there to
it
be,
doesn't feel
menopause
good.
party planners in the same
Yeah,
way that there
yeah,
are
yeah,
wedding
yeah.
planners and
I've actually thought about it, because, like, in the arts, there is funding in the arts, and I have a friend who wants to help me write a grant, and I thought, why not just like make
yes,
a
that would
grant,
be amazing.
or be like, come to me, I'll be your menopause party planner, and like get the Canada Council to fund menopause parties, because it's like, that's so great for money to go to that.
I would love to, if that happens, I need to see it because I think, yeah, I think more menopause parties. So I'm inspired, and I will try and start that
And
trend when the time
50th
comes.
50th birthdays, like what you were talking about, your 50th birthday, like, instead of like hiding away and being like, oh, I'm 50 or whatever, like, my partner has helped to support me in like celebrating that too, because they're so anti-ageist. They've kind of brainwashed me, which is helpful, because I think I was quite internally ageist before I met them. Yeah, so like for my 50th birthday, like, I have like, a huge meal planned with friends, with performances. I have a spa planned. I have like all these different things planned. Like, I think I have 3 or 4 days of planning, so I'll have like different birthday celebrations.
Brilliant. Birthday week. I quite
Yeah.
sadly for me, my birthday
Yeah.
is Christmas Eve, which is a
Oh,
terrible time to celebrate. So I was kind of thinking, well, maybe I could do it,
or you
in
could do
June,
you could
which
do
was
yeah,
like
50 and a
50 and
half.
a half. But yeah, I like the idea of, like a whole series of celebrations and
Yeah, so different people can come who can't make it, or they don't like to be social in a certain way, and just like
yeah,
really taking that space up, because I think, when we take that space up in our age, it does create that space for the next generation, or even people our age, to be, more proud of being older, because there is a peace in being older that, like, you don't really hear about, like, things settle, and you start to do the things you want to do. For me, it's been like that. I was kind of confused in my 20s and 30s, but in my 40s, I was like, oh, this is what I want to be doing. So I'm imagining 50 will be even better, because you're like, this is what I like to do. This is what I want to do for the last 30, 40 years.
figured it out. I think, yeah, there's definitely a time of life, isn't it, where a lot of people, not everyone, reassess, rethink, retrain, go
Hmm.
off kind of on a career tangent, or people like Joe, who I interviewed the other day, taking up paddleboarding and, you know,
Mm.
now paddleboarded from one side of the UK to the other and wrote a book. And
Oh,
so, yeah, I just love this idea of the second half being an incredibly sort of creatively fertile time where people kind of start discovering these parts of themselves that have been dormant or kind of just sort of squashed down by the
and I think that COVID made everyone kind of weird, like for the good and bad, but like and in between. But like for me, COVID, I was like, well, what do I want to do? Like my gym closed down. I was like, it went bankrupt, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll start hiking. And I was like, oh, I really like this, you know. And then I'm like, I with somatics, I found out somehow that I like cold water swimming. So I've
Mhm.
started cold water swimming and hiking. I was like, before COVID, I never would have thought to do these things, but I think COVID like got us to like be like, what do we want to do? Like, who are we? Like, what are we doing in our house? Like, what do we want to be doing? You know? And I think it was a really interesting pivoting moment. I mean, it was also really hard because we lost a lot of people and there's a lot of sorrow. But there was also a time to pivot. Luckily, the Canadian government, they paid us, which was amazing to
Mhm.
exist. And I'm very grateful to our government for paying us to exist during COVID. And that also changed my life. Universal basic income changes lives.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that we
Yeah, that's
must
a whole
kind of hope
project.
hope is coming in future. Will change a lot of people's lives, hopefully, if we ever get there. Tell us a bit more about your sort of process of retraining, and how are you balancing the somatic work with your kind of creative performance artwork? Do you feel like they cross over a lot?
It is an interesting question, and I've been thinking about it a lot with my TikTok lately because I've done a lot of eco-somatic experiments in my performance art. I did a whole series on Instagram for a show with me and nature, and now I'm on TikTok, and I'm kind of combining that my eco performances with my somatics, and I do think like my performances are becoming more embodied, less performative, but more embodied. And I do love working with the earth. And I have a friend there who started that organization. You have Extinction Rebellion, and
Hmm.
it's like it would be very interesting to have on your show, I think as well. But we are so disconnected from the earth, and I think performatively I was going that way, but now I'm doing it in a more embodied way. I'm actually just realizing this as I'm talking to you. But like,
what
but
what
that's
what do you
all
mean when you say in a more embodied way? What does that
like
mean?
instead of
Break
like,
that down.
I was doing a lot of work with me and trees and bushes and like performative work like that. But now I'm like doing the same work with like rocks and roots and things like that with my body. But I'm actually much more present due to like
Hmm.
the thousands of hours of meditation and the somatics work. So yeah, I am really interested in eco art and that idea of listening to the earth. Like me as a white settler here in Canada, my father's British and my mom's American, and just that white privilege I have of living on this like stolen land, and but
Hmm.
also like being with the land, like and honoring and respecting the land, um, which Indigenous faiths, religions, spirituality have done for all of time. And this the I'm Irish Catholic, and it's been very separate from the land, very like colonial, and so like my anti-racist politics, which like I was working on a lot during COVID because I had the time and it was
Hmm.
the time of history. So I'm still working on that stuff, but I think it's all connected. Like
Well, we're definitely very
knowledge.
disconnected from
Yeah,
the earth
yeah,
in a way that actually makes it very easy for us to kind of ignore the kind of
yeah,
the climate emergency stuff, right?
and to our bodies. Like we're
Mm.
disconnected from our bodies in terms of menopause or the cycles of the moon or whatever. We're so disconnected with like we got to go to work, got to go to work, or whatever the things we got to do,
Yeah.
and then
Or
like
I'm exhausted, but I'm just going to keep
and
going
we're on
anyway
pavement.
because.
We're on pavement all the time wherever we go, tarmac and like pavement and sidewalk. So it's like really interesting to put all those things together, like performance, earth, body, and just be like, oh yeah, I am actually made out of earth, and when I die, my ashes will become earth. And it's just this giant cycle, and I'm just this being for now. I mean, these are deep thoughts that I've been
I
having.
mean, definitely in the when we had the lockdown here, we as a family of four started going out to our local forest because
Mhm.
that was one place that we could safely go.
Yeah,
Um, and it's not very far away. And in 10 years, we never once visited
yeah,
this forest, and now it's just our favorite place to go as a family. And
I love that.
as you kind of talk about all the kind of the things that the pandemic forced us
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
through happenstance to do, it's like, well, gosh, if that had never happened, we'd never have found
No,
that as a kind of a connection to nature and done that, and other
I love
things
that.
have kind of come out of that connection. So
And it's so resourcing because the pandemic was such a shock for most of us, and like that, those forests and those trees were just so resourcing. And also, speaking of age, so much older than us. Like yesterday, the day before, I was hanging out with a 500-year-old tree, and I was just like, "This is a very old tree."
yeah,
Like,
we were actually at the forest not that long ago, and my husband, who's studying forestry now,
mm,
was talking about the elm trees, and because again they reach similar kind of ages, and just sort of talking to our 8-year-old about that, and it just kind of blew her mind that a tree could be 500 years old.
so
Uh,
much older. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I love this idea of the tree because also bodies are so many different shapes, and the trees are so many different shapes. And I just find like, and we when we look at all these different shaped trees, we go, oh, that body's not good, or that
yeah,
tree's not good. Like it's just like a beautiful tree growing in its own way. So I feel like there's just also so much teachings in the forest if we let the forest teach us. It's just like full of knowledge, and it's like an ancient old knowledge that like our ancestors were a part of as well. Yeah.
yeah. That's interesting.
There was a tree at my party. There was definitely some trees at my parties, and we gathered around the tree. So I didn't really think about that, but the trees were at my
Mm.
party.
No, I was just kind of thinking and musing about what you were saying about, different body shapes, because I think again that's definitely something a lot of us struggle with, is kind of accepting the fact that our bodies are potentially changing a lot around this time,
Mm,
and against our will,
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
just our kind of physical shape not kind of behaving, or yeah, these kind of, like you say, the sort of the hot flashes or whatever, just something that is just uncontrollable potentially. So that's a little scary. Your body kind of feels like it's betraying you, and kind of
But in also it's just also natural, like how our bodies all deal with it differently, and just I don't know. Like I think if there was more awareness, we would feel less weird about it because people would talk about it. Because when it started happening to me, I was like, "Oh, no one. I don't hear any." It's like, can you hear anything?
deathly
It's like
silence.
yeah, nothing, nothing. So when you contacted me, and when I found that wonderful Facebook group we're in, it's like
Hmm.
all gender menopause group or something like that. Like I was
Yeah,
like, I'm so glad this exists. And I could write there as a non-binary person, and people wrote back to me immediately, and I was like, wow, what a useful group, what a
yeah.
useful thing. And
Everyone knew about these things.
there's some really good books out there which my partner bought me for Christmas. I can't remember the names of them all, but I remember one of them being like, masturbate every day. I was like, oh, I don't seem to be able to do that, but I try. And also they were like, drink nettle tea.
Oh,
That
really?
was that was what I got out of it. Those were the
Okay.
2 facts. But I was like, I try to drink nettle tea, and I was living in Germany at the time, and they love nettle tea in Germany, so it was really easy to drink nettle tea. Apparently, nettle is like one of the best things you can imbibe or eat for menopause. But is it popular in the UK? Nettle?
No, I
No,
would say
no.
not. I do vividly remember making nettle soup at primary school, but there's my one and only time of ingesting nettles.
Love nettle tea. And there's something about nettles, it's just full of the things you start to lack in menopause. I
Ah.
Since I've lived in Germany, I've been drinking tons of nettle tea.
I don't think I've ever seen it here, but I imagine if I start
Oh, I'm
looking,
sure it's in
immediately
healthy
it'll be
stores. But the Germans are interesting because it's like when you go to the pharmacy there, it's full of herbs. Like somehow they didn't eliminate herbs from their
Mm,
medications. And it's interesting to think about how plants back to the earth, like the earth gives us these plants, to help us through these times, but don't really talk about them. Don't really know much about them.
mm.
In Canada, we don't drink nettle tea.
But I love as well that that you're talking about the fact that actually your experience of, perimenopause was actually, not overwhelming, not terrible, because I think there's, again, there will be a reasonable proportion of people are going through this who will be like you. And I think it is, again, really important, as we are talking about it, discussing it openly, that again it's helpful to people to hear
Mm-hmm.
those stories of people who have not necessarily sailed through it, but have kind of not had the sort of the overwhelming sort of experience. Because I think so many of the stories that we do hear, and it's important that we hear those too, are
Extreme, yeah.
it's really difficult. If I don't have hormone therapy or whatever, I don't know how I'm going to function. Or we need that full spectrum of understanding so that we can then kind of slot ourselves in and either go, oh, that's okay, then, I don't, it's not like I haven't done menopause properly because I didn't get hot flashes, or what I mean, or if someone is on that kind of other end of the spectrum where they potentially have really debilitating symptoms, but that we, that they then get to understand that those could be, there's sort of much more on the sort of the anxiety, crippling anxiety type of thing, but
Yeah.
not the kind of cliche hot flashes. That the more that we all talk about and normalize that, the more people will see their own experience reflected back at them.
Yeah, I long to have a long sleep. When as I was going to perimenopause, all of a sudden I was just waking up really early,
Mm.
and I was like just up at the crack of dawn most days, and I've just kind of accepted that that's my new life, and I need less sleep. I can get more stuff done, I guess,
I
but
was going to say
but
that's
but
you're suddenly very
I'm not
creative in the
getting them
morning
this
and like, oh, no
morning.
one else is awake.
Yeah.
All these ideas and
But
thoughts.
like thinking about my performance art, back to that idea, like I realized that a lot of my performance art was often circles of people doing an activity together, like a collective something, or like a
Hmm.
group of people. Like I do choirs of emotions and choirs of screaming and different types of choirs. And a lot, I realized before I got into somatics that a lot of my performances were actually somatic releases of different forms. And so when I got into somatics, now I can see how somatics inform my performances, but I didn't have the
Mm.
words to describe it. We were just doing it together collectively. There were like somatic collective rituals, and they were very, very powerful. And since COVID, people haven't really gathered much, so I haven't done many performances because I do a lot of group work. So now I'm just basically working with nature. But I am doing my first choir of emotions in October. So I'm not
Sounds
sure.
fantastic.
Maybe we'll be wearing masks. I'm not sure how it'll go.
But I think that's definitely, something that many of us have missed, is that kind of that connection and that community. And
Mm,
yeah, being able to kind of go out and re-find that again is very nourishing. Coral, I think we're going to have to wind up, but I feel like we could just talk and talk for at least another hour. But I do try and keep the episodes for around about half an hour, because we're all overwhelmed with stuff to read or listen to or watch, when we should be out there in the forest being at one with nature. But that's the
well,
good thing about podcasts, people. You can take
yeah,
them with
maybe
you
you
in your
are in
ears.
nature right now.
Yes, I hope you're listening to this in a forest somewhere. But
I
when you
think
finish listening to this, take your headphones out and listen to the trees.
you are.
Oh, thank you so much, Coral, for giving up your time. It's been such a joy.
Great. It was lovely to be here.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.